do we become happier? Researchers across the globe are working to answer that question, and they've been able to prove there are steps we can all take to become happier, more resilient, and healthier. Every Monday this month, we're going to be looking at ways we can become happier in our life. This morning, we're going to be talking about the science of happiness. We've got Dr. Doug Kruger, a professor at Northwest Arkansas Community College, with us. Thank you so much for joining us to kick off this series. I'm so excited about it.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. To begin things off, let's talk about what happiness is and what happiness is not.
Well, it's been recognized even 2,300 years ago in the time of Aristotle that happiness is not just an emotion. Happiness is something that you look at with regard to someone's entire life. How are they proceeding? Are they pleased with it? So I like to define happiness as living a satisfying life you can enjoy and value. So there's several parts of that definition. Satisfying life, are you pleased with how much progress you're making in your life? Enjoy your life? Do you have a lot of more pleasant than unpleasant experiences? And also value. Is your life meaningful? That's very important.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about some factors that may impact our happiness. Let's start with genetics. How do genetics impact our happiness?
Well, there was a study done in 1996 that showed that genetics has a huge impact on our happiness. There was a study of twins done in, of all places, the Twin Cities in Minnesota.
Okay.
Coincidence. And what this showed was that as much as 50%, perhaps even more than that, of our happiness level is determined by our genetics. Now, there's good news and bad news about that. If your happiness level is pretty high, well good for you and so forth. But it's not 100% genetics. So there are things that we can do to make ourselves happier in life.
And we'll be talking about those here in a couple of minutes.
Yes.
But let's move on to age. Does our happiness change as we get older?
Well, you start out in life very confident, and you think, I'm going to go out and conquer the world, and I'm not going to make the mistakes that my parents made, and you know, that sort of thing. And then life is ready to grind you down right after that. Okay, once you start in your 20s, your happiness level starts to drop and drop. You get married, you start a family, you have a mortgage, you have car payments, you have children, etc. So by mid to late 50s, that's the lowest point in your life, typically, of your happiness. But then it starts to pick up. You've paid off the mortgage, the kids moved out, and so forth. So it goes back up.
What about wealth? I feel like a lot of people think the more money I have, the happier I'm going to be. Is there any truth to that?
Well, that's the stereotype about money, that it solves all your problems. It turns out that, and there have been sweepstakes and lotteries for decades now, and there's been lots of studies on people that get a lot of money. And it turns out that money doesn't solve your problems. You just get a different set of problems. So instead of worrying about, oh gosh, how am I going to get a new set of tires, right? Why is this happening to me? Your problem might be, oh gee, I'm about to go to Europe next week and the maid quit. How am I going to get a replacement? Why does this happen to me? You know, so you get a different set of problems, but they're still problems.
So wealth doesn't necessarily make you happier.
No, it turns out that, in fact, we have probably all seen headlines about famous celebrities and very wealthy people that are very unhappy. And I don't want to pick on any particular celebrity, but a couple of years ago in 2018, Jim Carrey had an interview where he said he got a lot of wealth and fame. He got everything anybody could ever want. And then he was wondering, what do I do now?
Right.
And that's one of the problems with the way people look at money. If you see that as solving all your problems, and then you get all this money, you find out it doesn't solve them.
Speaking of wealth, also something that I found really interesting is when you win the lottery, so many people are like, oh man, I would do anything to win the lottery. But people who win the lottery, they may be happy at first, but that doesn't necessarily continue throughout the rest of their lives, correct?
Usually within about a year, they gravitate back to the level of happiness they had before they won all the money. And there was a study done in England that showed that as much as about half of the people lose all their lottery money within several years. They just don't know how to handle that much money.
Yeah, I know. It would be very hard to handle all of that. I know a lot of people are watching this morning because they want to know, how do I become happier? And there are some science-based tips, ways that we can utilize in our lives to help us become happier. So let's go over some of those ways.
Well, yes, there's been a lot of work done in science. And by the way, scientists like to use the term subjective well-being instead of the term happiness, for those of you who may be looking it up online. And one thing you can do is set realistic goals. Okay. And then work toward them. So don't tell yourself, I'm going to be happy when I win a Golden Globe Award or something like that. That's a little too specific. Be more realistic. So if you want to go into acting, say, I'm going to be happy when I can support myself and my family with the proceeds from my career, or, you know, something like that. You can also, well, if you work towards your goal, working toward it makes you feel like you're in control of your life, and that makes people feel a lot better about their lives, makes them happier. And speaking about control, manage your time by weekly planning. That's very important, to feel that you're in control of how you spend your time, what's going on with your life, and do maybe daily or weekly or monthly targets that you want to meet toward working with your goals. And I realize that if you're employed, your employer is in charge of a lot of your time when you're working. So then manage the time when you're not working, and that will make you feel better about your life. Another thing you can do is engage in lifelong learning.
I love that.
Pick something that, if it's not part of your job, then pick something that you're very interested in, but something, here's a tip from Plato 2,300 years ago, pick something that you can do throughout your life, even when you're in your elderly years, so that you can enjoy and get better at a particular thing, like gardening, playing a musical instrument, something where you can recognize there are some people that have mastered this particular skill, and that there's plenty of room for growth. Another thing you can do is maintain close relationships. It's easy for people to slip away from your life if you don't pay attention to them. So people that are important to you, nurture those relationships, cultivate them, make sure to stay in contact. And of course, with social media these days, this is easier than ever.
Absolutely.